Welcome to the Mom Spectrum, where each week moms share their stories about motherhood, careers, and finding fulfillment. This show is to help moms feel more confident, because there are a million right ways to be a mom. I am your host, Stephanie Schindler. Today I have Margaret Olds, and I couldn't think of anyone better to start this series off with because she is my mom. I had such a great time talking to her, and I learned a lot. I assumed that I knew a lot of what she would have to say, and it turned out that there was still a lot for me to learn. So it was a really great experience, and I'm really excited to have her here today.
Okay, I feel very honored that my daughter wanted me to do this. I kind of had a little different than the normal experience for a woman being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because usually they marry fairly young in their early 20s and start having a family right away. And my experience was I finished my college degree. I went on a mission for my church for a year and a half, and then I actually came back and worked and had a career and did not get married until I was 28. So my experience in being a mother was a little bit delayed. But I always wanted to be a mother. Growing up, you play with your little friends and all talk about what babies and what you're going to name them and all those fun things. And anyway, so I had my first baby the week after I turned 30. So that was kind of interesting, and I always dreaded that big 3-0, but it was so anticlimactic because I was so excited to have my first baby. And I ended up having 3 daughters, and it took a while to have our second daughter, and she ended up having cystic fibrosis, so that brought with it a number of kind of a different mothering experience, but we were very grateful for the blessings that came with that, and she has surpassed most of, had a very amazing life for having the challenges that she has. And then I had another daughter, and so I have 3 girls, and so much enjoyment from being a mom to them.
I like what you said about how it being a different experience than what most women had. I think it's less so that way, that would be so different now, but I think it is different now, and I think I can imagine back then it was even more so that way. So let's talk a little bit about right before you became a mom. So you said you served a mission for your church, and then kind of talk about the work you did after you came home from that.
Okay, I worked as a home economist for the government, for the Cooperative Extension Service, and I started out in food and nutrition and then worked in clothing and textiles, which was, at the time I kind of went into it, it used to be teaching people how to sew clothes, and then that was kind of at a period of time where that was changing. Women were working more and more outside of the home, didn't have time to sew, and it came to the point where you weren't saving money by sewing clothing. And so there was kind of a change there. So I ended up doing some different classes, like I remember there was a class I did, Your Professional Image, so teaching seniors in high school how to go into a job interview and how to present themselves. And actually, interesting enough, I found a computer program way back there in the early 80s called Your Ideal Silhouette, and you put all these different measurements into a computer, and it told you, based on these measurements, how to look your best, what different styles like necklines and clothing to wear that would make you look your best. And it was really fun and very interesting. I worked with people all over Clark County, and from preschool age all the way to senior citizens. I remember we actually did a fashion show with seniors and used clothing to do that. So it had some just very different, very interesting experiences. I loved my job, loved the people I worked with, and getting to meet different people all the time. And I loved teaching, and that was a very fun thing for me.
Awesome. So, would you say, so it seems to me that teaching would be a job that would translate so well into being a mom. Do you think that part of your career there was helpful to you as a mom?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I felt like I learned some good things and just in teaching and in the church you have so much opportunity. Like as a missionary, you're meeting different people and teaching, and so it definitely was helpful. And you think, oh, you had 3 girls, it must have been pretty much the same with all of them, and they're all different personalities. So you have to change your parenting kind of as you go, because the thing that worked with the first daughter didn't work with the second daughter, and on and on. And so you had to just learn different ways of parenting.
Nice. So something else that we didn't talk about is that you got a master's degree. So
yes.
What were some of the factors in choosing to do that? You weren't married at the time, right? So
correct. So I was working full time, and my boss actually told me that for me to progress in my work, I really needed to have a master's degree. And so I actually went, I got the master's degree in, I've got to think about the name of it now, post-secondary and vocational education. So here I was, never had any education classes, and I went back to get my master's with a lot of different high school teachers and people that had had a lot of experience in education. So that was an interesting experience, kind of feeling very much like a fish out of water, where I had to just learn as I went. But I think the good thing about that experience when I look back on it, because I didn't really use it in my career that much, because I basically got my degree, got married soon after, and then a couple of years later had my first child. But what was very helpful about that is I learned to be very organized. I used to be kind of a procrastinator, and I couldn't, because I was working full time, going to school in the evenings, so I had to have everything very, very organized and be, couldn't put things off. So it just really helped me to learn some good skills, good study skills with that.
So let's fast forward, and now you have just had your first child, or even leading up to it, really. What were some of the things that influenced your decision of whether or not you wanted to work?
Okay, this is kind of a decision that I'd made long before that point in time came. So when I was younger, when I was a teenager, well, let's back up even a little bit more. My mother was always in the home. And the things that she did to work, for example, she taught piano lessons, so she was there when I was home. When I was coming home from school, my mom was always there. And then years later, when I was a teenager, my dad got cancer, and my mom had to go to work. Now, I was a teenager. I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself, but I did, because I'd been so used to having my mother there, and you take those things for granted. I did not like coming home and not having my mom there. And I could feel the difference in that. And I just remember going to some things where she wasn't able to come because she was working. Everybody else had their mom, but my mom wasn't there. And it was really tough. So I remember at the time thinking, if there is any way when I'm married and have children, I would love to be able to be home and be a stay-at-home mom. So that decision had been made long before I had my first daughter. And I remember at the time, so I quit work about a week before I had her, and everybody was like, oh, we'll see after you have the baby. And I remember I didn't really say anything, but I kind of thought, I think I'm going to be home. I think I'm going to be staying home with my baby, and was just so grateful that my husband was supportive with that as well.
Yeah, so that is something I wanted to ask about. So, and kind of 2 things going along with that. So one, what role, well, let's just start with, what role do you think it had in your decision that Dad was supportive of you wanting to be home?
Yeah, I think that he always felt like that was important too. And I think we'd probably talked about that before we even got married. But I just know that he felt like it was important. He wasn't saying, well, of course you still need to be working because we need your income. And that's kind of another important thing I wanted to bring up, because there are decisions along the way that you have to make. For example, there was a time when we had one car, and if I wanted to have a car to use, I would drive my husband to work, and then I would be able to use a car. But we got by, and we actually moved from a home to an apartment to make things work for a while, so that I could be at home. Now, we probably could have stayed in our first home if I would have gone out and worked, but then I would have been away from my baby. She was less than 2 at the time, and that was a decision I wasn't willing to make. So there are sacrifices that you have to make sometimes, and not that I'm passing judgment on people that choose to work. That's completely their decision, and everybody's life's different, and different things work for them. But for me, that was something that I just felt really strongly about, and I'm grateful that my husband was supportive, my family was supportive, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. So that was kind of my second part of wanting to ask about, because I know it's not like there was always, maybe it's an easier decision if you have no need to work at all, then it might be easier to stay home. But I mean, there were definitely times I know that it would have been a lot easier to have 2 incomes. And yeah, I just think culturally today, it's people kind of are just like, well, this is just how much life costs. But,
I think today too, people are like, well, of course we have to have 2 cars, and we have to have all these additional things like vacations and things that, you don't have to have those things.
Right.
There may be a want and not a need. So
Right.
it's just for each person has to figure that out.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So, and something else we talked about with influences was some of the women in your life growing up. Do you want to mention?
Sure.
Like we talked about Gran a little, but
right. So
people.
we talked about my mom, and she actually did some substitute teaching too as well when us kids were older. So just things that she did that didn't have to be outside of the home, or away from us when we were in school or home from school. I wanted to bring up too that I was so grateful that I could actually do things because I was home. For example, I was a room mother a number of times, and it seemed like every week I was in one of their classrooms, seeing how the teacher taught, being able to assist with different things, and feeling like I was a part of their education experience. And so I just really enjoyed that. I remember one day I was waiting at the bus for my kids to get onto the bus to go to school, and a mom was dropping off her children, and she just said, "You're so lucky. Oh, I would just give anything to be able to do this with my children. I have to go to work every day. I can't go into the classroom." And I can't really appreciate it, I guess, as much as I should have, because I started thinking about it, and I thought, yes, I am. I'm very lucky that I'm able to do these things with my children.
Sometimes I feel like there's always this like awkwardness of like, well, what do you do all day? And it's like so frustrating when you're home all day and you're like, I don't know what I did all day, but I was doing it and I'm exhausted. But I do think there are at least certain stages of life where it does allow you to have time to do other things. And so obviously a lot of people, if you're working for a paycheck, that's a big demand on your time. It can't be. So what are some of those things that you were able to do with your time?
Yeah, there were some days where I thought, what do I really do with my time? But I actually had a walking buddy. We walked together for probably 15 years, that we would walk our kids to school. But what it was so nice for me is to have adult conversation. And so I would do that. I like sewing. I did like count and cross stitch and some different creative things like that. Our church is a very service-oriented church, so I would go and serve at the temple, or I would go and do service for other people, or just church callings where our church's unpaid clergy. And so we would, for example, I was the leader of the women's organization, and then had an opportunity to do that on a higher level where I trained several women's organization leaders. And so it was a wonderful opportunity for me to meet other women, work with other women, and just see women coming in from all different walks of life. And it was a really good opportunity for me to, I think sometimes you see people out in a public setting like at church or at other public places where you see their best and you think everybody else's life, we talk now about, my perfect life on Instagram, like everybody else's life looks so perfect. And having these opportunities to serve in church, I quickly became aware that no matter how perfect their life looks on the outside, everybody has their trials and difficulties that they're dealing with in their life. It's not perfect, far from it. And I'd oftentimes go home feeling very grateful for my bag of trials, so to speak. But it was a great opportunity for me to work with others and serve others. And so it just was very fulfilling to me.
Yeah, I feel like we're really very lucky to have the opportunities to serve through the church, because I feel like it is, I just think it's healthy to have something in addition to being a mom, and a lot of people find that through working, but I do think it's great to be able to do that through the church. And another thing you said that I think is so important is having adult friends. You talked about your walking buddy, and I think that so many women feel so isolated as they become new moms. And something we've talked about is how I'm always saying, how did you do this before Google? and we talked about how before women talked to each other to get their answers. Right. And now you can sit at home and look it up on your phone, and and it kind of creates an isolating environment. So kind of backtracking a little bit, how was it for you to become a new mom, just in general, but also, like, was it difficult to leave work, or you were like, yeah, this is it, this is where I want to be?
I think at first, yeah, I mean, because you're out in the public and you're getting people say, oh, you did such a good job on this. Yeah. And so you're not getting that constant, your husband doesn't come home every day and say, oh, you're a great mom, you've got this, you're doing great. So that part there's definitely an adjustment to that. Yeah, that was a little bit challenging. I do remember, so my mom was able to come and stay for a couple of weeks after I had, Stephanie's my oldest, so she was able to be there. And I remember when she left, there's this panicked feeling of, I'm in charge. I have to take care of this baby. And I remember she was crying, and I thought, she's probably hungry. It's probably time for her to eat. And then you just kind of get into the groove. And another thing about being a mother for the first time, everybody has advice. Yes. Oh, this is the best way. You really should be doing this. And you really just have to listen to it all and then decide what works best for you. And feel confident with, I'm the mother of this infant, and I'm going to do the best that I can. And I think moms beat up on themselves a lot, like, I'm not doing this perfect. And I think God will help you, and your family helps, and all your friends. But when it comes down right down to it, you're the one that has to make those decisions. And like I mentioned before, it's different with each child, and you kind of have to learn, like, you have to learn what their currency is. Like, for example, you'd say to one child, well, if you don't get your room cleaned up, you can't go out and play with your friends. And if this is the child that loves to stay at home in their room, maybe I don't care. So you had to find out what was important to each child. But it was a joy, and even as they came up through their teenage years, everybody said, oh, girls, it's going to be so hard. And they had wonderful friends, and we would have our times. I remember it would be like, okay, I don't like you right now. I love you. You're my daughter, but we're going to get through this, and things are going to get better. But you'd have your moments. And but it's all worth it. It's all worth it to be a mom.
Okay, so another thing I wanted to talk about was feeling, whether real or perceived, judgment from others. So we kind of talked about like when people are saying, well, what do you do? That sort of thing.
Well, and it's interesting too. I don't think it's as prevalent now, but past years, I think there was this big, I'm on this side of stay-at-home mom, I'm on this side of working mom, and they just kind of throw darts at each other, and you're not good because you're not on my side. And I think I hope that we're a little more accepting now of each other. But I know sometimes people would look at you like, oh, you're just at home with your kids all day. What's that about? And it just was, and I remember almost feeling like I needed to apologize because I was a stay-at-home mom. And then as years went on, and I just get comments from different people about how they envied the opportunity that I had. And I just came to realize it was a real gift that I was able to do that. So I instead of apologizing almost, I would just say, oh, I have the privilege of being able to stay at home and raise my kids. And so I think my mindset kind of shifted as the years went on, and felt really grateful. I mean, I had an education, I was capable of doing other things, but for me, it was so important for me, and I was glad that I chose that. And looking back, I'm kind of at a point where I can kind of look back over the years and in retrospect, and was I perfect mom? Absolutely not. Did I do things wrong? My daughter can attest that yes, I did things wrong. But I'm just grateful that I was home. I got to see the first step. I got to hear those first words. I got to be there for those things. So I realize that's a great privilege that many women don't have, would love to have now. But I'm grateful that I had those opportunities.
Yeah. I think it's a great point, too, that it is a privilege. Kind of as I went to make the decision for myself, and also just kind of researching it and studying out just in general interest and for the podcast, I very quickly realized that I often thought of it as a choice, but for so many people it's not a choice at all. I mean, but to have the privilege and opportunity to be home taking care of your kids, when it is a choice, it really is a privilege and a blessing. Okay, so what advice do you have for moms who are trying to make this decision of whether they want to work or not?
So I think it's something that you definitely have to sit down, if you have a husband, to sit down and have a conversation with him about it so that you know where he's coming from. And then you have, if you're deciding whether or not, it's just like, does this work? I mean, are we able to do this? What are our future goals? How is this going to align with that? And maybe even, I'm just thinking it'd probably be good to just put down the pros and cons and just kind of go through all of those and think, okay, and talk to loved ones, talk to your mother, talk to friends that you trust, and both sides, ones that have made it work with working and ones that have been able to be at home and it's worked well for them. And they'll probably be very honest too. There's definitely those days when you think, oh gosh, it would be nice to pass the kids off to someone else and just go out and be out in the world working. So, but I think you need to have the confidence that whatever you decide is best for you, that's okay, that you are enough and that you can give your kids enough.
Okay, and do you have any general advice for maybe, let's say, for moms who are in the thick of being at home and caretaking and that funness?
Well, I just think of you, Stephanie. It's good to get a break. It's really important, and that's one thing I really appreciated about my husband is he would take all the girls on a camp out and say, okay, mom gets a couple of days off. And those were very appreciated times. Or, when they were younger, I'm going to I'll take the baby and go see my folks or whatever, just to give me some time. And he understood that it was important for me to have some time baby free. And so I think it's really important that, my hat's off to single moms. It's so difficult because it's really hard to get a break. But if you can, I know one thing so Stephanie was our only for 4.5 years, and that's a long time to have just one child. And she was very social. So I think it was really hard for her to be the only child for a while. But I would make opportunities for her to be around other children. Like I remember meeting a gal at church, and she had 2 little girls. So we said, we'll take a couple afternoons, and she would take Stephanie to hang out and play with her girls, or I would bring her girls to my house. And then the other mom would get a break. And actually for me, it was a break when the girls came over because Stephanie was so happy to have someone to play. And then when we moved to another place where there were no children in the neighborhood, and I remember going to church and a new family moved in, and I was so excited because they had a little girl Stephanie's age. And I ran up to the mom and I said, I'm hoping that we can do some play dates. And she said, well, actually, I'm going to be working part-time. Is there any way that I could pay you to watch my daughter? And honestly, I felt like I should have been paying her because Stephanie loved this little friend. She had so much fun playing. It made my days go so much better for her to have. So it's good to create opportunities like that for yourself and for your children.
Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, thank you so much. That was great.
I loved it.
Is there anything else you want to closing words of wisdom?
Just if you have that opportunity, I guess the other thing I would say is there are those, we should never pass judgment. Yeah. There are those that want so badly to have kids and they can't. Yeah. So let's never pass judgment on others of where they're at. We have no idea what goes on behind the scenes, but for those of you that can be moms, just enjoy it. And I remember by the time I had my last baby and when she was an infant, I used to be way too worried about, I've got to clean up this or do that and do that. I remember being pretty sure this was going to be my last baby. So I thought, I am just going to enjoy this stage of life because they pass so quickly. And when you're in the thick of it, you think, I'm never going to be out of diapers or I'm never going to get past this. It will pass way too quickly. And then the kids will all be off home. And then it's a whole different season. So just enjoy it. Enjoy the little things.
Thank you so much, Margaret, for sharing your experiences as a graduate student, career woman, and then thriving as a full-time caregiver to your family. And thank you, audience, for listening. You can connect with me and find show notes at themomspectrum.com. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with a friend. Next week, join us to hear from Nicole Whitaker, a mom and full-time director of learning and development for a software company based in LA.